All right, I'm gonna call this regular meeting of the Public Utilities Commission to order for Monday, February 5th, 2018. Please rise for the record of the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First order of business is public input. You guys are on the agenda, so no public to input today. Correspondence, anything that's wasn't already communicated, all right? Minutes. Call for a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of December 18th, 2017.
I'll make that motion to accept those minutes.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Any corrections? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Wait a minute, I have to abstain.
You weren't there. Okay.
You've got to redo it.
Well, no, we'll just.
Well, second it.
Oh, well, Richie just re-seconded it, right?
Well, he made the motion.
He made it,
Paul did, like,
so I'll make
voted.
it and then someone second.
I'll second it. All right. Okay, so, once again, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Abstain.
and one abstention. And Pete's not here, Pete is absent here. Okay, next order of business is, meeting minutes from the special meeting of January 8th, 2018.
Make a motion, we approve it submitted.
All right, Paul seconds. Any discussion? And hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll abstain. Not present for that. Financial reports, Bob?
Okay, I handed them out, they're on the table there. This is as of 12/31, the January numbers aren't in yet. And if you look at the summary sheet right now, the water department shows 562 in last month, or the last report as of November 30th showed 371, so there's an increase there. In the sewer department, the revenue dropped, and to be honest with you, I didn't get a chance to analyze why that happened. I think it might have something to do with the actual payments on the Stony Hill sewer assessment, but I'm not sure. Dealing with the budget and all, it's, I put this together within the last hour or so. But the expenditures are pretty much in line except for the additional amounts for salary, benefits, and things along those lines. If you look at the individual pages in the back, the backup, I didn't give you, like I did in the prior month, the schedule showing the details of the different contracted services because pretty much they're exactly the same. For instance, in the water department with professional services, this month it's $56,000. In November it was 55. It's the same composition, Wright Pierce and also D'Amato Construction. And if you just go on along to page 5, we have 803 now. In November it was 785. And the details, if you still have those reports, Burns at 102, Hydro 7, Wright Pierce 64, and Zanelius at 616. And the other items, the 15 and the 40, are exactly the same, Core and Main, and also the new pickup truck. So outside of minor increases in the expenses, except for, I don't know why, like I said before, the sewer net revenue has dropped off as much. I'm gonna look into that and I'll email everybody and give you an explanation why whatever I come up with. So that's about it.
So what was it that dropped off, revenue?
Yeah, well, it's the total, it's the bottom line. In November, it was 640, and now it's 269. So, I mean, that's a big drop off. And the only thing I can figure is that we made a payment on the Stony Hill sewer loan,
Services are good.
and that's gonna reduce the revenue.
Yeah, debt service is about $1 million there in that month.
Yeah, that service $1,026,000, and the revenue collected was $1,127,000.
Well, there's about a $300,000 increase in services. Is that
Right.
related to the I&I?
No, I don't think it was that much, because if you go to, back into details, in the sewer, just, well, you know, part of it may be, City of Danbury made the second payment, which is almost $300,000 right there alone.
Okay.
And then, if you look at the contracted services in the sewer department, 176, it was 175 in November, so that's not gonna change. Weston is the INI, and it was $9,000, so even if it went up 1,000, it's not gonna be that. So, I mean, that drop-off could potentially be just a payment to the city of Danbury.
Well, yeah, because that would actually,
Yeah.
if you took that 300K and put it back in, it's
Yeah,
almost what it
that's
was the
right.
prior
Yeah.
year. And what was that? Was that for sewer
Well,
processing?
that's our,
Our quarterly fee?
quarterly payment. We're supposed to pay it on an annual basis, but we only send them 25% every quarter. So, and they don't have a problem with that, but it runs about $294,000 a quarter.
Okay. No, that would make sense.
Yeah, that's what it is then.
Okay. All right.
We talked it out aloud.
And there's almost a $10,000 increase in debt service. Is that due to interest rates, short-term notes?
No, that would all, the short-term, the Stony Hill Sewers is a fixed amount. It varies by month, but it's fixed over the 20-year period, which is now down to, 14, 15 years, something along those lines.
Mhm.
But it's fixed per year. The average rate, I think, is 3.88 if you took it over the 20-year period, but they actually, Ann bills the individual rate per year. It doesn't vary that much, but it could go from, it has been as low as 2%, but it runs in the area to 3.75, 4%.
Okay. All right.
Well, and also the contracted services for Kovacs was in there, that was a large amount of money too. Would that have brought it
Yeah,
down?
Kovacs is there, that's $40,000. That's in that 176.
Oh, that's in the 176?
That's in 170, it's JWC Environmental, 121, Kovacs was 40, and Weston was 9.
Right, yeah.
So that's the bulk of that 176.
Oh, yeah, the Kovacs didn't buy that, we fucked that up.
Yeah.
Okay, now, water looks pretty good.
Yeah,
So we'll have to, as we're getting into budget season, before we get to the end of the fiscal year, we'll have to take a look at the projected capital expenses, you and Tom go over
Tom and I
that.
gotta sit down and we'll go through that.
And just make sure that the rate structure we have in place, with the increase that's programmed in for the next couple of years is sufficient
Mhm.
to keep paying off the debt and keep us healthy.
Right.
All right. Do you guys have any other questions? All right. Okay, well, I entertain a motion to accept the financial report.
So moved. Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
That carries. Invoices. So I'll put a motion on the floor to get the ball rolling here to approve invoices for PUC approval dated February 5, 2018, in the amount of $80,043.54.
Second for discussion.
All right? Okay.
Is the money to Weston and Sampson, is that part of the 10,000 that we approved, or is this still prior? The 2599.
The $25.99?
Line 5.
I don't know, Bob, can you answer that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
No, on line 5, Weston and Sampson, we had a couple months ago authorized them an additional $10,000, which is part of existing project to continue. Is this part of that continuation?
I don't know.
I would imagine it is.
Yeah, but it doesn't say that on their invoice, though.
It just says capital improvement plan.
Yeah, that's where it is.
It just says professional services through December.
Well, this goes back a way, so I'm gonna ask Doug, do you know offhand?
The only work, where's the capital improvement plan, that's what that's the $10,000 value work that we authorized them to work on, capital improvement plan.
Tell you what, why don't we just say it's part of the improvement and deduct it from that amount?
Okay.
And, Kathy,
Yeah,
you make a
there's-
note of that in the future, the next meeting,
Okay.
that would be, you know,
Can I ask on that very same invoice, not that I'm cheap, but the overhead, 174, oh, I know I'm cheap, but 174% of $835, is that a standard rate for overhead?
Well, normally the overheads are based on a salary plus, well, you've got a base, a wage base, and then you've got all the expenses, and you come up with an overhead rate, and they're applying that to distribute the overhead expenses to the individual jobs they're working on. Well, 175,
174% of $835. That's steep.
you know what, I've never seen an invoice broken down this way, maybe it's standard, I don't know. I've never seen it. Mary's shaking his
just,
head, he's the only guy in the room. who knows that.
All right, well, I'd like to amend your motion.
Okay,
Let's take Weston and Sampson off the bill until we get an
Yeah,
explanation.
I think so too. Do you know, did you see that one?
Yeah, no, I see it. You know, when you look at the rates above, I mean,
Yeah, I know.
no one gets paid $40.47 an hour, so somehow that's, I don't know the explanation, but.
Yeah,
I
you
think
probably have to
paying
go
$100
some,
an hour for a professional sounds logical.
yeah, reference the state contract as well, because I think the state stipulates these, the billable rates and the rates that they're allowed per the state contract to charge us, so we can get some clarification.
Yeah,
It'd be worth it just for our knowledge.
Yeah.
so you wanna pull this one out?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that a consensus?
yes.
Sure.
All right, well, I made the motion, so I'll amend it. Hold on a second here. Right. Yeah, who's good at arithmetic?
Here. I've got this thing. Okay, we have 80,000.
Yeah. Frankly, I think any invoice that doesn't give me any description of what was going on is unacceptable.
54 minus 25 point. Here.
I have 77,443,97.
correct.
Yep,
Ooh, good job, Marty.
all right, so I'll amend the motion to approve invoices in the amount of $77,443.97, excluding of item number 5, which is Weston and Sampson invoice number 477202. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all right, anything else? All right, hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that carries. Okay. Director's report, Tom?
First thing, I just wanted to extend a thank you to everyone here at the commission, and also Doug and his staff and Kelly and his staff for welcoming me and trying to get me settled. I do appreciate it. I've been here about a month, so what I've been looking into is the various reports that we have going on, the capital improvement plan, the water supply plan, and just trying to get myself up to speed on how we operate and how the system's working. So between that and getting some tours of some facilities, that's been my main focus here most recently. Another item I've been looking at is just some of the upcoming DPH regulation requirements as far as reporting that we need to do for the coming year. I think Kathy said she's already working on the cross-connection report. We have a couple other reports that are due, watershed report. I'm looking at our monitoring schedule with Ed, just trying to get that straightened out in terms of making sure the state has, we're on the same page as the state as far as what's required. And the other thing that came up that is due this year is our next set of dam inspections. They're due every 2 years. So 2018 is our next dam inspections that are required for deep. Other than that, I'll be looking at shortly, and I think Doug got information on that as well, as far as a P&Z application for the Bethel Food Market. So we'll have to look at that as far as their sewer allocation. And lastly, tried to get in touch with a property owner related to the Chestnut Tank project. The number that we found, unfortunately, when I called it, is not in service. So I'm waiting to get my business cards, and I'm gonna stop by, at least leave some information, I'm assuming they're not gonna be home, but try to get them to call me back so we can at least start a conversation.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
What a big notice.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure they've noticed the big sign at the bottom of the hill.
Yeah, I'm sure they have at this point. They have to pass it every day when they come in, but they don't know necessarily what's going on, how it may impact them, and
Yeah.
really the tank project is sort of separate from the Briar Cliff project.
Right.
But at least we have the door open where we can say, hey, we wanna just meet about the project and
Mhm.
let you know if you have any questions or if there's any potential impacts, and then we can start talking to them about the property.
Are there any new laws that are taking effect this year based on the last legislative session through DPH or DEEP?
Yeah, there is gonna be an assessment fee that's gonna be imposed upon all the water utilities in the state for the DPH to retain their primacy. Primacy is basically them administering EPA's Safe Drinking Water Act requirements. So typically, the EPA is the Safe Drinking Water Act. The various states then implement, the requirements. And the state was successful this year in getting that included in the budget bill. So what it comes down to is community water systems are gonna be required to bill their customers $4 per service connection, which then we'll be able
Annually?
to recoup. It's $4. They said it's up to $4, so I don't think they've kind of figured out the number yet.
Okay.
So for us, if we have about 3,300 customers, give or take, 3,500,
Yeah.
it's gonna be a $12,000 or $13,000 hit, but then we will be able to basically put that on the customer bills. So it's gonna be a pass-through.
Okay.
And they.
When is this effective now?
I think that they're gonna send us an invoice. I think the way it's worded is sometime in like May, and I think it's gonna be due like December or January of 19. They're gonna charge us for 50% at that point, and then 50%, I think, by the following May. So we've got some time to figure out how we're gonna get it on the bill, and Bob, we'll talk about that as far as the budget and all.
Well, does it have to be called out separately on the bill or just absorbed into the operating? Does the law say anything
I
about
would
it?
think we would want to put it separately, just for clarification, saying, hey, it's not the PUC, it's the state.
I have to read that section a little more closely to see exactly what the mechanics of it is.
Yeah.
Basically, they're allowing you to just go ahead and not have to go get approval, like the private utilities have to go back to PURA.
Yeah, right.
Won't necessarily have to do that.
Right.
And if they wanna flag it as this fee, probably some utilities are gonna wanna do that so they can let their customers know, hey, it's not us doing this to you, it's the state of Connecticut doing it to you.
But it's up to $4 per year, right?
Yeah, and we're not sure is that number gonna change in the future as they decide they need more funding to retain their private primacy?
I think it'd be easier, since we bill all of our customers quarterly, put $1 on each one, say, state of Connecticut.
Marty, if we added something like that, a call out on the invoice, do we have to go through the public hearing process?
I gotta remember, I read it briefly from Tom, and, I think it's not the same, they're exempting you from doing certain things, and more than Pura. We may not have to go to a regular public meeting, public hearing that we normally have to go through to make any charges or anything. But like Tom, I gotta go back and look at it.
Yeah, I think we gotta look at
read
that
it
section a little
like
closely. And we have time before we have to actually, act on it.
Yeah, I think we gotta do something, but I don't.
Okay, all right, well,
Official.
But it's not mandatory that we charge the customer.
I suppose it's
I mean,
not.
We could absorb it into the budget.
I suppose you could.
Well,
But
I
I give-
think if you use the word assessment, that's on a customer.
is that
I don't know what
what
else
the
that
word
would
says
mean.
assessment?
Exactly.
Again, I think I gotta get the bill in
Okay.
front of me again and kind of
Okay.
dive into it a little more.
All right,
I'll
well,
check it,
well,
I'll look into it too.
Yeah, we'll look.
Okay.
All right.
Those that are on Aquarium.
They're assessing all the water users to pay DPH for what the feds are making them do. So,
DPH has tried this over the years and they've not been successful, but this current budget process over the last year or so, they got this in there.
government is great, isn't it?
And I think their bottom line is they're trying to get 2.5 million, so they're backing into that number.
Well, that's one way to do it. All right. Any other questions for Tom? Very good. New business, Briarcliff Pump Station. Tom, is that you again, or did you turn that over to Meredith?
Well, this was, I think to get the funding through, we have applications that we have to submit.
This is the resolution.
Correct.
right. Did you, did you have handouts for everybody on that?
I didn't have a handout for, on this particular, I gotta find what I have.
Kathy, did you include that in the email?
No,
I didn't include his backup, but I have a copy of what you gave me the other day, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, I have it here.
Okay, so basically, Marty will correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure, but basically, we have two projects. We have the Briarcliff Pump Station project and the Water Main Extension project. Both of these are eligible for DPH loans. So in order to qualify for those loans, the PUC basically simply has to make a request, pass a resolution requesting backing from the town of Bethel. That will go to the Board of Selectmen it'll be on the Board of Selectmen's agenda for tomorrow night meeting. And when they pass it, then they have to, Board of Selectmen has to set a date for a town meeting and pass it to the Board of Finance. Even though no taxpayer dollars are involved in it. This is a PUC item only, so it does not impact the town budget. But because we're invoking the full faith and credit of the town of Bethel, we have to treat it as though it's tax dollars. So, let's see, do we have the amounts of those two
Man,
bonds?
I didn't make copies, but what I highlighted in yellow there,
Yeah,
each project's gotta be listed separately.
Yep.
We've gotta identify the costs, and
Okay.
we've gotta include the breakdown of the construction costs, the contingency, and other, which in this case is gonna be legal fees.
okay,
So
so I'm gonna put a motion, first I'm gonna do two motions. The first one I'm gonna put on the floor is for the Briarcliff Pump Station, and I move to approve the Briarcliff Pump Station, project, in the amount of $862,637, which includes $814,892 for construction, a 5% contingency, and $7,000 for legal costs. Funding to be provided through a Connecticut Department of Public Health low-interest loan. Is there a second?
Second, what's the total again?
Total is 862,637.
Second for discussion.
Okay, all right.
What are all the legal fees involved in that?
I wish they were going in my pocket, but they're not. I believe what they're gonna be is, for bonding counsel.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I'm sure there's other, just like the town's budget, legal fees has a lot of other things thrown in
Yeah,
with it.
yeah, no, I was thinking more land acquisition and,
No.
we own the right of way, so.
Pretty
whatever
sure
it's
most of
coming
it's
from.
bonding costs, legal bonding.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, item number 2, I move that we, Public Utilities Commission approve the water main replacement project with an estimated cost of $977,830, $977,830, which includes $924,600 for construction, 5% contingency, and $7,000 for legal costs. Funding to be provided through Connecticut Department of Public Health low-interest loan.
Second.
Okay. So, any further questions?
So we're really spending 900,000 plus 800,000.
Correct.
Definitely, we have to look at rates.
Yes.
Well, according to Meredith, last time, we underutilized the money we were already set aside for these projects, so
Yeah,
we haven't spent what we said we were going to spend up to this date.
we have to keep an eye on it every year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
far, we're okay. Well, but again, we're gonna review those, make sure. Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 That carries. Old business,
Uh,
PUC?
Matt,
Oh,
just-
yes,
Just for the record,
yes.
you wanna make a motion that these amounts be passed on to the Board of Finance
Oh.
for the benefit of, you know.
Board, how, Board of Selectmen, you mean?
Board of Selectmen.
Okay, make a motion that we pass the Briar Cliff Pump Station and Water Main Extension Project and the Water Main Replacement Projects recently voted on to the Board of Selectmen for consideration.
Second.
Okay, those in favor?
Aye.
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 Right, that carries.
Thanks.
Right, thank you for that catch, Marty. Old business, PUC capital project.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go through my handout. The first project, Hoyce Hill Water Booster Station. So the last couple, 2 weeks, we had an operator training. So we had, about 7 people from the water department basically giving training on how to operate the Hoyce Hill pump station. We basically spend probably 6 hours in the station operating and changing the settings and make sure that the operators really understand how the station works and, how to change different settings to operate different pumps, look at the tank levels, and so everybody was pretty comfortable. And I think Tom initiated, basically now, have basically weekly meetings there, to basically take the operators out on a weekly basis so they get familiar and kind of, understand how to do it on a weekly basis so they don't basically forget how to use it. So,
Let me ask a question here for Tom and Marius and Kelly. We've got all these projects, and it just dawned on me the other night. Documentation, I know your firm is responsible for assembling this documentation.
that's correct.
And is this a written documentation, or is this on a disk?
It's basically written documentation and on a disk. It comes in 2 different forms. I mean, it's the same documents, but we can provide it electronically and also in binders. It's basically operational maintenance manuals. So that's something that comes with the contractor that we review and then turn it over to the town. It's for major piece of equipment for the pumps, electrical system. So that comes at the end of the project.
Okay.
Essentially.
Did we also let me ask Doug, the wells, did we have a complete set of documentation on those also?
We do, and what we're, I'm beginning to brief Tom on the asset management system that was purchased by the town via the Eureka Tank Project, where we'll have electronic copies on our server, the town server. But we're also attaching, I think we're also having 1 record copy of a paper copy in the office that Kathy has been managing the paper copies. But the long-term record of these things will be electronically part of the asset management system, so that if you ever wanted to find out where these O&M manuals may be, in the case of Maple Avenue Wellfield, you would actually go to that geographical location within our electronic system, which is kind of like operating on Google Map, right? You find out where that station is, click on it, and you'll have a whole library of all the various manuals and work that were done via that project. And we're doing something very similar to all the historical document reports that we have in our department for work that's been, undertaken over the past 50 to 100 years. So
Yeah.
this is part of that
I know
management
this has got nothing
process.
to do with it, but here we are, Richie, you asked a question about the A2 survey for that entire school complex up there. And I believe we did that at Berry, and I think we did it at the high school too. And, the question is,
Who has it, where is it?
Where is it?
Well, that's part of the global,
Yeah.
global importance of the asset management system
Right.
is to collect all these. I mean, that's been all my years in the public sector, that's been the biggest thing that's broken my heart, is where all the historical records, all the tens of thousands of dollars, millions worth of work that each of the communities that I've worked for, where are they? In a lot of cases, they don't exist now, but thanks to the hard work of Kathy and Brittany in the Public Works office, they are organizing all the historical data information that's together, and in specifically the case of all the work that we've just done, it will be, in the coming months, all
like I said,
connected. Yeah.
When we were approached at a previous meeting, a different issue entirely about the documentation, they asked me and Rich, as far as, where is this? And I said, it's downstairs there. Where?
If time were allowed, which it doesn't tonight and it's not ready, but in the future, we'll be able to pop up here and we'll be able to go to these sites and I'll be able to show you, how the system works and hopefully give you a greater comfort level.
It's a comfort level right now.
But again,
Spend the money.
I'm
And,
beginning to brief Tom begin to brief Tom on that, but we are talking about it. It's been a centric part of our discussion over the past number of years that after everything's said and done, we want all this information,
Good.
that it'll never be lost again.
Good.
And all the,
Thank
hard
you.
work and money will be of value in the years to come.
So, going back to Hoyts Hill.
Okay. Right, so we did the training, we also tested the fire pumps, so we did it last week we tested the big fire pumps, so we're actually pumping through a hydrant, it was 40 degrees outside, and we're actually pumping 900 gallons a minute at the highest elevation, so everything worked very well. We still have some minor adjustments, punch list items to do to the instrumentation, but, the pumps worked, and, we've got a pretty good flow over there, top of the hill, very good flow, 900 gallons a minute, a lot of pressure, we had to shut it down because it was creating so much water up there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You could have gone across the street from my house and flushed all the sand down.
So Kelly, we're not having any more low water pressure complaints from.
No,
up there.
it's great. I
Well-
mean, when I get into my report, I'll tell you a couple issues we have
Okay.
up there.
Okay, I'll leave it for Kelly to entertain you. That's the-
They're exploding shower heads?
No.
Okay, so everything is good. Again, Zanellis is gonna be back on site when it gets warmer, because to get everything done at once, take the bypass equipment away and finish up the site. But, station's working, we have a punch list items that's on the way. Oh,
I have a question about
Sure.
Pinellas there. All right, have you issued them a substantial completion?
Not yet.
Not yet,
no.
okay, so.
We're still holding back $80,000, and then we're still holding back the retainage, so we're
Alright.
holding back 150. I'm gonna be meeting with them shortly here, go through the bunch list items. I want them to start working inside the station and get stuff done, because they actually ask, can we release 40,000 of those 80? I said, well, let's meet first and let's see some work inside, just gonna finish up some punch list items inside,
Mhm.
and then maybe we can release half of it. But we wanna make sure that there's enough left to finish up the site work, so.
Okay.
You hadn't had any discussion with them about leaving the existing pump system?
That's gonna be the time when we meet to talk
Okay.
about the punch list items, and
Alright.
we'll probably meet with Tom, Tom, maybe not, just gonna have him here and.
Yeah, that may be one, I know you wanna try to keep those pumps, if it wasn't in the contract that they turn them over to us.
Yeah.
I don't know how far we'll be able to get with that.
Well, I understand
Yeah.
that, but also, they are way past their
Mhm.
completion date.
Mhm.
And in their contract is a $300 delay clause in its contract, so there's more than enough money to cover the cost of that pump in there.
Okay, we'll look at that provision
Yeah.
and add it up.
Yeah.
Okay. The Brian Clint Manor Booster Station, in your email that Kathy sent out on Friday, at the last meeting when I was here, I said they gonna request a winter shutdown. They did that, so the new schedule, the revised schedule shows basically the entire project completion July 10th, but July 10th kind of indicates just the final paving. It shows the pump station being online by like June 20th, so that's kind of, we requested an extension with the DPH because that's part of the consent order. The extension was granted to June 30th. So we're gonna be cutting close with this winter shutdown, but right now it looks like they're gonna be able to meet it with the pump station online and providing pressure to the residents. They actually indicated to us last week that even though they requested the winter shutdown, they actually wanted to do some work, weather permitting, even though, they requested the winter shutdown, they wanna get in there and start cleaning the land. So I think that they basically said, let's meet on site and mark the trees that we're gonna have to take down and things like that. So I think they're still trying to do some work, weather permitting, to move the schedule forward. But you have the revised schedule in your emails that was sent on Friday.
No, that's True Blue, right?
That's True Blue, yes.
We just paid an invoice for the setup, have they bought any?
Well, the invoice for 9,000 was really, for the initial shop drawings, for the bond. We actually spent some time, we walked the site, they put a sign out there, so this is for the initial work. So I think it's part of the mobilization cost, it's not the full cost, it's basically part of what they started submitting shop drawings, we've gotten shop drawings back to them, they installed a sign, we had site work with them a couple times, there was some issue with the utility company there was a Camcast pole, there's a hanging a cable within the easement, so they spent some time investigating where the cable was coming from, and so I believe the 9,000 is just justified to pay them for the last month, so. But the water main design,
Yeah,
so,
One
sure.
quick question, just for my own knowledge. The line that says reconnect services, and it's 4 weeks long.
Well, so these are,
4 weeks to connect without water for 4 weeks.
well, these are very long services, so I think, because we have to run them, some of them are like 200, 100 feet long, it's a lot of rock, so I think they just kind of like give them more time than they need to. They kind of, they want to say it's gonna take, shorter, but, I think there's like 7 services, the total length is probably over 500 feet in those services, and You know, there's a lot of rock ledge and things like that, so I think they just gave themselves more time than they really need to be on the safe side, but it really shouldn't take that long.
Okay, so that reconnect is really running. the
It's
whole-
running, right, it's really running the services from the main all the way to the 7 properties, you know, they're connected to the 16-inch line.
Yeah, that was a spirited discussion last year, as I recall.
Right.
The length of those lines.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of rock and ledge, so they just wanna make sure they have enough time and.
Yeah.
I think Dino's question is, are they gonna be without water, and it's not, they're
No.
gonna be running
Yeah,
new
no,
lines,
they're-
and then
they're
flipping.
on the
over.
old system.
Okay, yes, that's correct, yes, I'm sorry, yeah, thank you,
No.
Kelly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the water main design, so our goal is to really finish up the design end of February and basically get it to the Connecticut DPH on March 1st, because they're gonna take probably 30 days to review it, to approve the bidding, and then basically have the bidding documents for the town to advertise on April 1. So our goal is, to give DPH 30 days to review the bidding documents, get the basic letter, authorizing it out to go out to bid, and then go out to bid on April 1. And I think Kelly already gave us some information on the existing water main, and Rick from my office is gonna be meeting with you probably this week, just to go over some stuff.
Excuse me, Max.
Sure.
Just, can we get a list of what they are?
Yes,
Those?
sure, yeah.
Because we never got a list before from the presentation.
Oh.
What had been done in the last.
Yeah, I don't have a copy with me, but maybe, Tom, do you have a copy of the?
I don't think I have a copy with me. I thought I saw something that
On
had those
top-
streets listed.
That top page that I gave you, that paperwork,
I already passed it on
It's all
to
right,
Marius.
maybe.
Yeah, I'll
Well,
provide
we'll
it.
Just give it to Kathy, have
Yeah,
Kathy.
yeah, I'll provide it, yeah, sure. Okay, and the next item is, I have Greg Smith here, he's our hydrogeologist, he's gonna give a PowerPoint presentation, quick 10-minute PowerPoint presentation on the Brexton well field, so. Doug, is there any way you can put the PowerPoint on?
you got it?
Oh, thank you.
You wanna hit the buttons for me, Doug?
Yeah, I'll do my best.
So Kathy, question for you, is the system recording us or the presentation?
No, I don't know, now that you say that.
It's probably recording us.
He's
I
probably
think it's
recording us and not
and it'll
not the
probably just, it
presentation.
won't, you know.
We can give you a copy.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, well, we can post it on the website, but I just wanted to see, that so the audience at home
Mhm.
will not be able to see this, but we can.
But they'll
we can
hear,
post it later.
they should
Right.
hear him talk.
Okay, great. All right, welcome, Greg, thank you.
All right, couple new faces, so we're gonna go for the next slide there, Doug. Start off with a little bit of background here. Really the goal of this project, we're looking for a new groundwater source at Bergstrom Field. The whole idea is to replace the existing surface water sources that you guys have. It'd be really expensive to try to update them. Groundwater is a much cheaper option, and it looks like we have some viable sources or viable potential sources. Essentially right here, and I don't know if you want to go through this, Marius, but we've estimated 590 gallons a minute would be required to get you guys through 2035 with all your growth, build out, that sort of thing. Really the overall project goal has been 900 gallons a minute, so that's kind of for a 50-year build out.
Right, so just, if I can just interject you, so these numbers are based on the water supply plan, so when we did the water supply plan, we basically look, okay, well, how much Bethel is gonna grow the next 50 years, next 30 years, and basically we've made our water projection based on the population growth in Bethel. So the 2035 is like a 20-year increase, and that 590 also includes, your growth in town, but also replacing the 2 treatment plants. So this 590 doesn't represent all the growth, but also replacement of the treatment plant. The same goes for the 900 gallons a minute. 900 gallons a minute is for 2065, which that's what the water supply requires. Water supply plan requires water projection for the next 50 years, okay? Why we show these 2 numbers here is because maybe the way, Greg is gonna talk about it a little bit later, maybe the way to attack the Brexton welfare is really to log in the next 20 years, because it's really hard to predict, population growth and, for the next 50 years. It's really hard. DPH wants you to do it, but it's really hard to get a good number. It's much easier to do it for the next 20 years.
So go to the lower standard, the 590 gallons per minute, this is part of the state's water plan?
Right, well, this is part of the water supply plan that we developed for the town.
Oh, okay.
That was submitted to the
Our plan, okay,
DPH, yeah, that was submitted to the DPH, right?
Okay,
And we look at the population growth, existing usage, and, we kind of, see how the population is gonna grow from Bethel, and I know the Bethel is growing. Every time I drive in, there's a lot of new construction going on, so, again, they want you to look at the next 20, 30, and 50 years, but Because they wanna know, make sure that you have plans, even though you don't have to do it right away, make sure that you have plans on land dedicated to hit the 50-year mark.
So, what is our current output?
Well, the current output for the Wayport Avenues, right now, we have 2 wells.
Yeah.
Right here, cheat sheet here.
A little over 1 MGD.
Yeah, only 1 MGD.
A little over 1 million gallons a day.
Okay,
Like 360 and 380.
That's the number, yeah.
So just a hair over.
So that's gotta be somewhere around that 600 GPM number then.
700 gallons a minute is 1 MGD basically, yeah.
748.
Yeah.
okay.
Right, so you're looking for the 2035 year, looking a little bit less what you're putting out right now, 590. But that number also includes taking out the 2 treatment plants, so you don't have to rely on those treatment plants
Right.
for flooded water. So it's,
Right.
it's not just all in growth, it's also taking out those 2 plants.
Let me ask this question here, just in the event, okay, that you do run in through a dry season, okay? Is the state saying that we can't use Eureka anymore, or that you're phasing out these plants?
Well, phasing out is really up, it's gonna be up to the town. I think, we had a discussion earlier today with Tom, and I think it will be beneficial to the town to actually retain the existing permits, withdrawal, don't really abandon them. I mean, you could kind of push off the improvements to the treatment plants,
Yeah.
till you maybe get new water supplies, more water out there. But the state's not gonna make you give those up. But basically what we're talking about was really not investing any more money
Yeah.
into the treatment
Because,
plants.
it's seasonal, periodically we go through these droughts.
Right.
And, can you really,
Right.
you don't know what your water levels are in your aquifers.
Well, when we drilled the new wells last year, or 2 years ago, we were in the drought, and those wells were, at Maple Avenue, were performing very,
Quite
very
well,
well for being in a drought. But anyway.
Okay, so that's where the 2 numbers come from, and Greg is gonna talk about the implication of those numbers later, so, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, so you guys originally had HRP out there. They drilled a couple wells, did multiple mobilizations. They go drill 1 well, didn't work out, come back, get another mobilization. So you're getting hammered on mobilization. So I guess next slide. Our approach is to go out there and essentially drill, the goal is to drill 5 to 7 test wells during the first phase, which was completed last year. And we found a couple highly productive locations. Really, we essentially, the way we run this is we do small diameter pump tests, but we're able to pump quite a bit of water out of a 2-inch well. So I'm able to pump up to about 100 gallons a minute out of a 2-inch well. We have a 2-foot observation well, so if you've been out there, I know Rich has been out there a bunch, see 2 wells next to each other, I can pump out of 1 well, measure water levels in another well. That's a proxy for a large diameter well at that location. So it's kind of a tried and true methodology. It allows you to stress things more than, say, pumping 10 gallons a minute with a little tiny pump in a 2-inch well. So we're pumping everything from suction. Found 2 locations that had some really good sand and gravel, highly productive. One was about 600 gallons a minute. The other one looked like it was about 1,000 gallons a minute. Now that's based on running those pump tests, getting some ideas of how those wells were performing. It's doing a specific capacity. I'll get into that in a minute. But I essentially calculated what it would take to use about half of your available drawdown with a theoretically designed production well at that location. So it's a conservative number. There's a lot of water that can be pumped out of this site. So really the yield of the wells isn't an issue at this point. It's more of a permitting issue and dealing with DEP and interfacing with the fisheries and all those different departments. So water quality does have elevated hardness, iron and manganese. Iron and manganese really, you see all the wetlands out there. That's kind of par for the course in New England. When you get near wetlands, they kind of act as it's like a tea bag, if you think of it that way. Low pH, especially when you start pumping, it essentially mobilizes all the iron and manganese that's bonded to the soil. So it's not a big surprise to see that kind of water quality. However, it's well within a manageable range that we can make it work.
What is the pH in those circumstances?
Well, pH in wetlands is sometimes as low as 4, but once you mix it with the groundwater under pumping conditions, you can have kind of low 6s, something like that.
So you would expect the levels to decrease, not increase?
Yeah.
The iron and manganese.
Yeah. Actually, guess next one, Doug. So after we completed the first phase, you guys authorized to do the second phase. We're kind of halfway through that. We broke it up into 2 sections. We've completed tasks 1 through 4. We're working on 5, which is the report of all the work we've completed, and that will go to DEP and to the health department and get us into that first phase of permitting. So it's kind of really the first official shot over the bow with the state. We initially met with DEP a while back, bounced some things off of them, sent them a memo. And this is always key at the start of a project, just to get everybody on the same page, kind of look for some red flags, that sort of thing. They were generally very positive about the project, but did note that just given the size of the drainage basin where we are and you know, the anticipated stream flows, the yield may be limited due to environmental impacts on stream flows. So that's something we're gonna have to deal with throughout this project. That may limit the yield, it may not. We essentially have to get through the end of the next phase, or the end of phase 2 to really put our finger on that as to exactly how much this site's gonna be worth. So essentially we broke this up into a bunch of different little steps, and this allows us to kind of take you know, smaller bites out of it and really not waste your money, really, is what it comes down to. It's trying to be cost efficient as possible. I can go out there, try to predict what all the regulators want, but nobody can ever do that. So really it's kind of take a small bite and then send it back to them and then come to a consensus and then go continue doing the work. So that's where we're at in phase 2. We submitted a preliminary data collection plan, which was really that first chunk that we took, and then engaged DEP, and then developed a monitoring network plan, and then we're able to get all the rest of the data that we really need at the site from a geologic and monitoring well standpoint at this point in time. I guess the next one, please. So this is a map of the site. Maple Ave's down here, kind of just off the screen. You can see each of these red dots are the new monitoring wells that we had just drilled out there. TW1 was another monitoring well that another location we just drilled and tested, and that's probably good for about 600 gallons a minute. So that's a third highly productive location out there. There's a lot of sand and gravel. It's just you gotta know where it is and know how to find it, is what it all comes down to. Really, we drilled to the north, these two, 518 was about 112 feet to bedrock. It's about 68 feet to bedrock here. So there's about a 20-foot rise topographically, but the aquifer is really diving off in this direction, relatively steeply. We ran out of casing on that one at 120 feet. So we weren't anticipating being able to go that deep, or deeper than that based on the existing data at the site. So this well was about 18 feet deep. I'm not surprised by that. I anticipated the aquifer was petering out. You can see it's mapped here. This yellow is all the sand and gravel aquifer. But this boundary here actually correlates with some of our site observations when they were doing the culvert bridge construction. You can see that they had actually done a road cut here, and it was all just till, which is really not aquifer material. So that gave me the idea that, all right, the aquifer definitely ends right here, and then, so that kind of confirmed some of those observations. So this gives us a lot of good data. We're developing some geologic cross sections based on all these monitoring wells, which is required by the state, and we're compiling that information currently. We're also required to do a couple piezometers and stream monitoring flow locations. We put those, I'll get into the stream flow stuff in a little bit, but really the whole idea is to have one upstream and one downstream, and really we're anticipating our impacts to be kind of primarily in here, so I can measure the flow here, measure the flow there, and then we know how much we're impacting that stream, is what it comes down to, and that's required by the state as well. There's also 2 additional monitoring points that the state required. We're working on getting access. This is all DEP land, so there's a little bit of a process if you know how the state works. It's kind of
Yeah, for the selectmen, that's the permission, the certificate that they require of the town to allow Matt to negotiate with DEP to give us permission to go on their property.
Mm-hmm.
I think Tom will be putting that forward, but that kind of, it's a graphic, what,
Yeah.
you know, where we need to get to allow us to do that work.
It might be a resolution or a motion that we're gonna need from the Board of Selectmen at some
Yeah,
point.
it was on the agenda before, but we
Okay.
didn't know what it was.
Okay.
So now we
Yeah.
understand what
Yeah.
it is, so.
Yeah.
And then there's also just a handful of private wells here. We're gonna have to essentially contact some of these people, request to monitor their wells. If the way it works is if they let us monitor them, we're required to monitor them. If they don't want us to, you know, it's kind of their tough luck if we impact it. It's really the way things are set up, so it's kind of we always try to engage them in a positive manner, and we want to get the data. It's good data for us, the state likes it, and it also kind of helps them out a lot, really, because it gives them a leg to stand on if they're impacted. Then you'd be required to either get them a new well or put them on town water or something like that. Guess the next one, please, Doug. So phase 2, we were out there with a mini sonic drill rig. We chose this kind of type of drilling because state requirements they're essentially looking for almost continuous sampling. The other method I use is less expensive, but once you have to start doing the soil sampling, this method does it in situ, but the other method I essentially have to go out and change the tooling all the time, and it would have taken us literally twice as long just to get that data, just to meet the state requirements. So we chose this, and really what it comes down to from a project cost is a lot faster, ends up kind of being a wash, a little more expensive drilling method, but really gets us to the same point. TW1-18 I talked about, highly productive well, 40 gallons to the foot, that's a specific capacity. And you know, it's 600 to 800 gallons a minute would be a sustainable yield from that location. I guess the next one.
Greg, can you show the location again if you
Oh
go
yeah,
back?
sure,
on the
go
map?
back a couple.
Yeah.
So that one's right here, so kind of on the back side of that little parking lot. It is pretty close to the stream, and DEP has expressed some concern. We've tried to talk to them about maybe looking at a 2-well system, which gives you a lot more operational flexibility. So we're kind of exploring all your options at this point for a final product standpoint. But they were somewhat reticent of that idea because they thought if it's closer, it may have greater impacts on stream flow. Generally, my experience is it depends on the geology, and really, it's a gross water budget. So it's either gonna impact them or not. It's not gonna really matter if we're right there or further off. So, in my experience, it may not make a difference. We're gonna do a groundwater model as well with all our pump test data that's coming up. So we'll be able to run a bunch of different scenarios where we can look at that based on all the impacts we're seeing and say, okay, yeah, well, it doesn't look like it's gonna be any worse with the stream flow. So we can make a case at that point once we get to the end of this phase. All right. So this is one of the pump tests we had done. This is actually from the first phase. This is the best well we had out there. It was TW1-17. You can see essentially static water level here, and we turn the pump on. We're pumping at about 74 gallons a minute. We got about 1.38 feet of drawdown. So that gives us a specific capacity of 53.6 gallons to the foot. So that's essentially gallons per minute divided by how much you draw that well down. So pumped at a good rate, only dropped it almost 1.5 feet. So there's a lot of water there, and by looking at the type of well we want to put in, kind of a preliminary design, able to calculate about 1,000 gallons a minute for a conservative estimate on well yield.
So Greg, could you just explain the water level and the number that you calculated?
Yeah, sure.
everybody? Just the drawdown?
Yeah, essentially what you do is, we know the static water level, so that's how far it is below ground. We know essentially where the bottom of the well is. That gives you a total water column. I was estimating we'd go with about 15 feet of screen, so you can subtract that off of that total number. So that gives you basically a total water column above your well screen. And from a conservative standpoint, if you take 50% of that, so you're only using half of that available drawdown. So really, if you wanted to dewater the screen, you can pump it at 2,000 gallons a minute. But in this case, 1,000 seems meets our goal, and we didn't really need to push it, that kind of thing. So that's kind of the long and the short of it. But it's a good approach, and we've had a lot of success with it.
Okay.
And Greg, that's not a theoretical, but that's a number you can pull out of there without knowing what the impacts are.
Correct.
Okay, so obviously, once you start doing some testing, you're gonna now see what the impacts are to the environment, the stream, and so on.
Exactly, yep. So that's really the main driver on this. We know the water's there, it's just how much of that water
Yeah.
are we gonna be allowed to take by state standards, is what it comes down to.
Question for you. You
Sure.
mentioned earlier in the presentation that the hardness is a little bit elevated. Say we have operating wells there, as that water turns over a little faster, does that hardness go down a little bit?
When you start really pumping on a well, depending on how much water you get from stream flow, and you can get some chemistry changes
Yeah.
over time. Really, especially the difference between pumping at 74 gallons a minute for 2 hours versus a 5-day test at 900 gallons a minute. That's a total different animal. So really, that's a really cursory water quality. So the next step, we're going to do a full suite of water quality.
Okay.
And that'll give us a better idea of where things will be down the line.
Reason I ask is that we have had some isolated complaints as we've shifted from reduce the amount of reservoir water, surface water, and blending in more well water from the Maple Avenue wells.
Mhm.
Some residents have noticed it. And my sense is it's not real severe because that they did notice the shift right away.
Yeah, usually whenever, I'd always come in on this end of things, and usually once you initially put these new well sources on, or in a different, pumping scheme, you get that initial, riling up of the system, some changes, and then everything kind of stabilizes after time.
Okay.
Maybe Marius can probably talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, and with these new wells, also, I think that the long plan is to really try to bring this water to the Maple Avenue, so you're gonna be blending the two waters
Right.
to kind of dilute it down a little bit more, so.
Right, okay. All right.
Next one, please, Doug. As part of this, there's quite a bit of data that we were collecting when we were out doing our most recent round of drilling. We were doing some slug tests, which are required of all the monitoring wells that are out there. Essentially, we take a solid, it's essentially a concrete piece of PVC filled with concrete. So it's heavy, and you can drop it in really fast. We put a transducer in the well, and what that does is it essentially displaces the water. So it's the equivalent of adding or taking out that much water once the well's stabilized. So in this case, I believe this one's a slug in, so we dropped it down, and this is actually a curve in a HydroGeo program I have called Octosolve, and you could fit this straight line approach to the data set. In this case, it actually went down really quick. When you see a response like that, that means it's productive. 356 feet per day, so that's essentially a velocity aquifer parameters. Hydraulic conductivity is actually what it's called. And really, that's kind of a metric that hydrogeologists use to understand how fast water can flow. So that's 356 feet per day is actually really high. If you get above 200, you usually get a pretty good well. So this kind of further plays into our whole understanding of we gotta some good pumpers out there. You can also see there's kind of an oscillation there.
Yeah.
If you have a bad well, like a not productive well, it would just actually kind of follow that curve almost. So you would see this wave under dampened response, it's called. So you essentially have waves going through the aquifer, and there's not enough. It's so coarse down there that it's just allowing those waves to propagate and not bounce back. So this is all good data pointing to a really productive aquifer. Next one, please, Doug. So now we had those 2 stream gauges that we installed out there. You can see there's a staff plate, and then on top, that's a little transmitter that kind of sends data. We're sending recording at about every half an hour. So we're getting a water level in the stream every half an hour. And then there's a little transducer at the bottom of this PVC in the water. And we can talk to it real time. It goes over the cell network. So we essentially got 6 months of data out there, of stream flow data, particularly at the upstream site. Some beavers moved in downstream, and that kind of compromised a segment of the data at this point. But really, we have some 6 months of data is actually pretty good, and that's a significant amount of data. So it gives me a lot to work with.
Have you seen a significant delta?
What change in the? I'll show you that in a minute.
Okay.
So I guess we'll go to the next one here. We were out there, essentially what we did, this is all just raw gauge height data. So this is physically the water level in feet, so 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 feet. So you can see all summer, not a lot of precipitation, it's just kind of petering along, generally pretty low. Then we had this big event in October, and then the water level stayed up quite a bit. It's just a seasonal change. You get all the leaves falling off, the trees are sucking up a lot less water out there. So, it's kind of given us those seasonal signatures, but we caught the dry period, which is very important, and that's what DEP is going to want to be looking at this point. So those stream flow measurements we're doing, you want to get those at a bunch of different heights, different stream flows, and you can essentially make a rating curve and correlate this gauge height to a stream flow. So the real graph I'm going to be giving you guys in the future will have essentially I'll have both gauge height and then stream flow in cubic feet per second, and that gives us a good idea of how this stream is responding in the real world. And we'll have to back into it with look at some precipitation events and that sort of thing from historical data as well to get a good handle on what we're looking at here.
So really what this is important is the base stream flow before we start pumping, and then we're gonna take that information, compare it to during pumping, and see what it does to the stream.
Yeah, and I'm able to calculate some statistics from this that DEP will be very interested in looking at, because that's the kind of stuff they want to see. What the 7Q10, that's like essentially 1 week's worth of the lowest flows that would occur in a 10-year period. So it's a stream flow statistic that a lot of regulators hang their head on at this point. So we'll be looking at that as well.
We didn't have to do this for the Maple Avenue wells.
Those were replacement wells, so DEP wasn't even involved. So we just had to deal with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're already permitted for that rate, so we just essentially had to go and prove to the health department that everything worked and water quality,
Okay.
construct the wells, that sort of thing. So kind of starting a little more from scratch on this one. Yep.
I didn't, my question was because we were closer to the stream that we had to do more recording and stuff, but it's because it's a new well field.
It's a new source.
That's why we're,
You're trying to determine how much flow.
Yeah.
Whereas previously you already had that number.
yeah.
Yep. Next one, please, Doug.
Well, that was before.
So right now we're gonna kind of wrap things up here over the next couple slides real quick. We identified a couple locations that are highly productive out there. We're currently working on our Task 5, which is essentially a report to the DEP, moving forward to propose our pump test plan and providing them with a summary of data, the stream flow data, all that, everything we've done to date. We've already kind of done an interim report, so it's kind of more going to be an addendum. We also need to do a site suitability request. The CTDPH has already signed off on the site. They've already been out there when the previous consultant was there, so they've kind of given it their preliminary blessing at this point, but we have to go through the motions for the exact well site. So that's kind of where we're at. So moving forward, we're looking to move to the next tasks, which are 6, 7, and 8, large diameter test well and pump testing. Then there'll be a final report, and groundwater modeling is kind of interdispersed throughout that whole thing. So it's not really necessarily in those order, but 8 would start right with 6, or as immediately as possible, and that's a subcontractor that we have do that. So one of the reasons that is actually helpful, instead of having me do the model, it allows us to go to the state and have 2 independent sources. I'm going to be doing a classic analytical approach, which is required, and they'll be doing a model, which is also required. Built in the regulations, there's a lot of stuff they require for models, generally, compared to other states, so it actually drives the cost up quite a bit. Every other state, it's much less model, let's put it that way. So, sure.
Go ahead, Rich.
The large diameter well, are those the actual final wells, or are those just another test well?
That's something we could talk about, because you got a couple options here. One approach is to, actually I'll talk about that on the next slide, actually, so if we hold off.
My same question, because I read your report.
Sure.
About the large diameter. To me, it was cursory. I said, it doesn't make sense just to, it really makes sense to do a large diameter.
Yep, like a final production well, you can, they still call it a test well until it's permitted, so.
Permitted, yeah.
It would technically still be a test well, but it'd have the well seal and be able to be converted over to.
That's what, an 18-inch?
Yeah, I'd recommend an 18 by 24 if we're looking at that 900 gallons a minute figure. Here's where it gets tricky. But if we're gonna be looking at that, 590, 600 gallons a minute figure, which may be an easier sell with the state, just from an environmental impact standpoint. And this is all based on information, feedback from the various agencies there, that some people feel that it may impact the stream too much. When I asked them what are allowable impacts, they said, well, we'll see what the data says. So it's not in the regulations, and it gives them a lot of leeway to kind of cherry pick what they want. So it's an interesting process, but you really got to get there, do the test. I guess we'll go to the next one here. I'll talk about it on the slide after this. So there's some additional requirements. We've done a bunch of all this work and identifying sensitive receptors, which is a big part of this. And you don't know that till you actually get out there, submit things to the state as required, and then they give you feedback, send you letters and say, all right, like NDDP, which is essentially, they look at endangered species. So they've identified some turtles at the site. They essentially said you have to do a bio study to assess the presence or absence of turtles. So we're actually looking at getting some prices for that. That would be subcontracted. We essentially just manage the subcontractor. Fisheries is a concern. In their letter, really they're concerned mostly with trout in that brook. However, they pretty much listed every other species that's in the brook as well. So,
But when it comes down to, if you find no species there, is that concerning to them?
that would just say that's existing conditions. So,
Okay.
it is what it is. Maybe they would want to look at why potentially. I don't think you would be on the hook for that. However, they would just probably be more curious. They might send their people out. That kind
No
of thing.
snipe hunting.
There you go.
Greg, I got a question, because we just completed that bridge project up there, there was some information done on the turtles and species and all that. Is that usable, or you
I
have
think
to
some of
start
it.
from scratch?
I think some of it maybe. However, we're a little further down, so we'll take some of that information, but they're going to have to look further down, I believe.
Yeah, because, we went round and around with that up there with the turtles and stuff.
Yeah, it's a tough nut to crack, really. It's time consuming.
I should have mentioned, this has triggered something. Part of the Plum Trees Road Bridge, and I might have to talk to you about, put it in my budget, is I believe, I'll talk to Fuss and O'Neill, but the Army Corps of Engineers is requiring us to do a post-construction analysis hydraulically upstream as part of the environmental permit that we got from the Plum Trees Road Bridge construction. The kicker is that we haven't changed anything because the upstream hydraulics is really determined by the old train trestle.
Right.
And I've been very reluctant to put it in my budget for $50,000, but we should get together and talk to Fuss and O'Neill about this thing and at least get it in the budget so that but let me,
Unbelievable.
yeah, so, that just triggered an unfortunate something, so.
Government at its best.
Yes, well, we're giving our Back to the Future DeLorean and giving the bill to the railroad company in 1859. All right.
Any more
No.
questions? We also need to, there's a well that was identified up at McElroy Park, which is the next park north. Need to dig into that and see if that's a viable background well. I don't know if you guys know if that's used at all, because I know the one at Birchland Field isn't used.
It's not being used, well, I take that back.
Do they use it for irrigation?
Originally, that well was drilled to fill the pond.
Okay, so they just kind of let it sit there.
And I don't know if they converted that well to water supply to that or not.
I might just have to
But
have
it
you
was-
guys
it was
assist
a
along
large-
with your local presence and network with whoever that is, Parks or,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Church, I believe Church drilled that well years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I have some information on it, but just coordinating access and trying to figure out if it's how much it's used and that sort of thing, so. I've also, based on DEP's responses for really stream flow being a significant issue, I want to do a lot more sampling during the pump testing, which is essentially collecting water samples from the existing monitoring wells out there. So there's a little extra cost in there from that. But that will at least allow us to grab a series of samples, typically 1 to 2 a day from a series of points. And then we can look at any changes under pumping conditions, and that'll help us to essentially look at any changes in the chemical signature in the groundwater that may be a result of infiltration of the brook there. HRP actually delineated previously with the CTDPH delineated high water mark. I think it's kind of erroneous the way it was done. I think it's more of a wetlands flagging. So I think it would make our lives a lot easier if I'm going to try to get them out there, have a chat with them, and see if I can steer things in a little bit of a different direction. And because scientifically it doesn't meet the guidelines of the regs or the intention of the regs, and it's kind of will make the permitting process potentially a little more difficult with the wells.
So the high water mark is basically a seasonal high water mark, and you need to put your new well so many feet away from that. So, want to make sure that it's done properly, because that's gonna drive how far the well is.
Vertical feet, correct, Marius?
Horizontal.
Okay.
Because you don't want that water from your, wetlands to come into your well.
It's like, it's a setback.
It's a separation distance, exactly, so.
Groundwater under the influence of surface water, which essentially means you have to do 4-log treatment, a full-blown plant. You don't want that. The whole idea of groundwater is to, have cheap, or inexpensive source with a lot less treatment. Let's put it that way. So that's one of the goals here. And then there's 2 additional monitoring locations. We talked about this before. We're working with DEP to get access on their land. These are hand-driven piezometers. I'll get out there and use my muscles and go install these. But they essentially wanted to look at water levels on the other side of the valley under pumping conditions. So it's kind of part of the assessment, and those are required. So we're making some progress, and we've identified some issues that have the potential to come up here, particularly endangered species in the fisheries relative to stream flow. That's the biggest concerns for this project. Everything else, that'll take a little navigating, but part of the idea of hiring a biologist that's capable of doing this work, because that's not our world here as an engineering firm. They also do this work often in Connecticut, so they have rapport with the regulators, know how to present things in a way that will make navigating the regulations a lot easier. Guess the next one, Doug? So large diameter test well, we can convert that into a final production well. One of the industry standards is to go out there, pretty much most of the New England states, it's the way people did it a long time ago, and it's kind of carried over, is to, because it eliminates risk, particularly on my end of things. We don't know the water quality under stress conditions. So if I put this well in, pump it at 900 gallons a minute, and we get a hit, then you run the risk of having a slightly more expensive well in there. However, you go with the less expensive well, you actually have to construct a whole new well after that, abandon the old one, and then run a second pump test. So it's more expensive, but there's a little bit more risk. So I just want to make sure where we are. And I've done it both ways on a lot of different projects. It really depends on comfort level of the client, comfort level of me. And by having that 18 by 24, if we can only permit the well source for 300 gallons a minute, you may have an oversized well, a more expensive well. However, it may pay off given the high iron and manganese and hardness, because that well will require a lot less frequent well cleanings. And well cleanings typically 20 grand per well, something like that. I believe, it depends on what chemicals you use, that sort of thing, but that's a good metric, 20, 25 grand. So if you had to clean it every year as a maintenance thing, this may allow you to do it every 4 years. So you could recoup that money to have that in a relatively short time frame by having an over-designed well, particularly with the water quality we're looking at here. And we're really looking at about a $40,000 difference. We were talking before, bouncing a few things off of each other. We could, even if we're going to be looking for that 600 gallon a minute zone, we could actually get away with a 12-inch well out there, pretty easy. So that would even knock more cost off. However, just given the water quality, it may be worthwhile for us to go a little bigger. It'd pay off down the line.
When you're looking at the outer limit, the 900 gallons per minute
Yep.
number, What was the assumption on population at that point?
That was 2050, 2065.
Five.
Yeah, but we-
50-year.
50-year projection, I don't have the
That's
number
based
with
on
me.
current
Okay.
growth.
Yeah.
All right, well, we might wanna look at that, because there have been previous studies that go back a couple of decades that suggest that Bethel will top out at no more than 22,000, which may still be a good number, may not, but we should take a look at that and see how close we are to it.
Yep.
I mean, we may have more cushion than we realize,
But even if you put the larger well in, you just pump it at a lower
Right.
yeah.
thing,
And
so it's.
your well will require much less maintenance.
Yeah.
At that point, much less,
We
so
like things that have-
it's worthwhile. You can just put a smaller pump in,
Yeah,
smaller final
yeah,
pump,
yeah.
and you essentially just paid a little more for,
The
you know,
case.
we're gonna have like a
You
Cadillac
gotta
well,
drill it, so
essentially.
the only actually thing you're doing is doing a bigger casing in.
Correct, yep.
It's like upgrading that 6-inch main to an 8-inch main.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
correct, thank you.
And then just, I guess a little benefit of actually going to 900 gallons a minute is, okay, if you need that 900 gallons a minute in the next 50 years, you can either know, okay, this site is gonna have the 900 gallons a minute, or this site doesn't have it, and we have to plan to look for additional land in the next, for the next 50 years to basically hit that number, if that's the right number.
Well, but the aquifer is cumulative, right? I mean, you could put 50 wells out there, but you're still gonna get the same yield.
Right, but in different location, not in
But
this
they're all,
aquifer.
but they're all in the same.
Well, not in this aquifer, in different town of town.
This is all the same
Oh,
location.
yeah.
You know, how far
Right.
apart are these wells from each other?
Yeah.
So, I mean, how many wells do you need and what
Half mile.
I don't wanna have, 8 wells out
Right,
there, all
exactly.
equal 900 gallons a minute, but
Right.
you know, you can
We're
only
thinking
run
about
one.
just two up there, right?
Right.
Yep. I mean, part of this work that we're gonna be doing here, the model is gonna be key. That's essentially going to, we're gonna look at, the Maple Ave well field versus our well field, so we're not gonna be adversely impacting those wells by what we're pumping out
Right.
here. And we'll be able to look at stream flow potential, and also that other location I had identified for a possible 2-well system. So if we went with the 900 and that was feasible, you could maybe break it up to 450 gallons a minute. And that would give you a lot more operational capability down the line. So that would be something after we get through these next phases, that we can make recommendations and really have a good conversation about, because we'll have some hard numbers we can put our finger on.
Greg, there was also discussion about the one main well, but then also having a backup well.
Yep,
For
yep.
when you gotta do maintenance or.
That is another option as well. So you could have one that just is a mechanical backup. Like at Maple Ave well field, we managed to retain the old wells for backup wells. So if pump goes down in one, you can switch over and then get somebody to come help you out, and it just makes sense. Took a little finagling with the.
But right now, we're
state.
just talking about the one well, correct?
Correct. That would be just for that one well, and once we get through this, you're essentially permitting the site for a yield. And then if we wanted to divide it up into 2 wells, you have to drill the other well, run both the wells at the same time, and a second pump test.
The question, we're doing the checking up for one well right now. On a second well, do we have to go through the same process again, or is this all inclusive?
This would get us essentially potentially one permitted well source. If we wanted to break it up, you'd have to go through, essentially put another well out there,
Yeah.
and then pump test both these wells at the same time again. So it's construction cost of a second well and pump test cost.
Would we have to go through the state process with the DEP?
Very light, extremely light. We'd already have this site permitted for X amount of gallons per minute. We've already looked, we'd have the sensitive receptors all addressed at that point. Essentially, we just say, okay, here's the well we're gonna put in, the model supports it, here's how we're gonna construct it, and then they sign off on that. It's more of a letter type report. And then we can go through and do the remaining pump testing. We've compiled all the information, in these phases that they're gonna need for permitting these wells. I think that's it.
That's it.
Okay, good, thank you. Any other questions for Greg?
Thank you for that information.
Thank you very much, very thorough.
But we're gonna have the test now.
Yeah.
Sharpen your pencils.
All right, moving on to the final item on our agenda, supervisor's report. Kelly, what's leaking?
Nothing right now, we got to all of them.
Good.
This past couple weeks, of course, we had the main break on Fleetwood the day of the last meeting. This past week, we got a main break at Plum Tree Heights, pretty substantial. It took them 3 days to find it. They finally had to bring in a company to come out and, they call it subsurface monitoring to try to find out where the mains were, where to turn it off. There's 2 separate systems up at Plum Trees. Kruger came in to work on it, and he brought in Butterworth and Scheck, but they started working on it Thursday, and finally Saturday afternoon they found it, and it was a 6-inch main, circle break on an 8-inch main coming from the Plum Tree side, not from what comes over the hill from Kingswood. So that's all tightened up. They got a little more information on what's there. We had a service leak at 60 Hoyts Hill. I don't know if anybody noticed the water in the middle of the hill going up. Usually you think that's your regular groundwater that we get every year, but this time it was actually a service leak. So that was repaired. Now, getting into a little bit about the Hoyts Hill Station, last Saturday we had a service leak at 4 Governor's Lane. When they got out there, the pump was running 115 gallons a minute. All 3 of the service pumps kept up with it. The tank stayed full with the whole time. It was probably down for about 4. It was leaking for probably about 4 hours, but a repair was made. So if that happened on our bypass system that we had in place, that we would have lost the whole hill, and we would have had to start from scratch. So that part of it worked out very well on the service side. Now, like Marius was saying, we did the fire pumps Thursday. Once we had a hard time getting the pumps to go on, flowing off at 2.5. We could only get 185 gallons a minute out of it. So it wasn't enough to make the fire pumps go on. So we shut it down, opened up the steamer, the fire connection in the front of the hydrant where we were able to flow more water. And at that time, as Marius said, we had 900 gallons per minute. I don't think that hill has ever seen 900 gallons per minute. It was almost 800 just through the fire pumps where they're rated for 750, and then plus you had the service pumps running, all 3 of them maxed out. So what we have up there is excellent fire protection. That's my main concern, that we needed to do that. We needed to find the weather that was at the right temperature so we could flow some water and get it going. So I really feel good about what we got up there at Hoyts Hill. The only thing that I need to address with the fire department is if they have an issue up there, they're better off just hooking onto the steamer versus going on the 2.5s, because they're gonna get that initial flow that's gonna make the pumps go on. I mean, you're talking a lob coming out of that hydrant. When the fire pumps kick on, it took over and you were blowing water right across the road.
Where did you open the hydrant at?
All the way at the top of Spring Hill. At the highest point. I think that point is even a little higher than by your house.
Right,
Paul.
it is. Yeah, right at the cul-de-sac.
So it really worked well. I felt very confident in it.
Did you just open the hydrant, or did you have the fire company up there with it?
No, we opened the hydrant fully. But what we wanna do, weather permitting, we wanna get the fire department up there and do a drill. So we'll put a pumper up there at the top of Spring Hill, flow some water, and then we'll see what we can keep up. But 500 GPM, 900 GPM is just phenomenal. I don't think those mains have ever seen water like that before. Even off, and actually the old fire pumps were 500s, weren't they?
350.
350?
350, yeah.
Okay, so we doubled just with fire pumps. But it's,
On the 2.5 inch on the hydrants, do they need more pressure? Is there something that could kick the fire pumps on at a lower pressure or a lower flow?
I would say no. I think we just need to tell them operating procedures is to hook up big. I mean, they could still surround the hydrant like they should be, gating both sides of it and hooking onto the steamer, but I would flow the steamer. And we know because we did it.
The steamer lowered the pressure enough at the pump station to kick
So
the fire
kick it
pump on.
right. But
When they did the 2.5, it wasn't
it
enough.
didn't. Correct.
Exactly.
But the tank maintained, I don't think it went below 9 feet.
No.
So we were maintaining between 9 feet and 10 feet for opening and closing. So it's.
And what we did too, we ran the test twice. So we did each pump. So we wanted to make sure that each pump was gonna come on automatically.
So
Cool.
mechanically, we're in good shape. We're in
Good.
real good shape. Now it's just, you know, doing the, what you see with your eyes when you
I
drive
say
by.
plant the grass seed.
Yeah.
So will you contact the fire department or someone like that in the very near future? So
Yes,
they're aware of-
I'm trying to track down Scott Murphy, but I'm gonna tell Tommy, so both sides of town know it, as well as Tommy known as fire marshal.
Okay.
So, yeah, no, I wanna be in contact with them. So that was my biggest concern, was not having those fire pumps in place, so we're good with that. We had a service repair, we did at 68 Greenwood. During this cold spell, both of the water meters for the police station and new police station, they froze up and blew up. So it's on the contractor's dime. He's gotta pay for those 2 new meters. We've already ordered and had 2 new meters put in there. I think it was just that weekend when it was so cold, the vault where they had the meters wasn't sealed all the way around. I think that wind just started some turbulence in there and just froze them up. So, it's on their dime, not ours. But other than that,
That $1,800 bill, we'll disregard it.
for that should be on the contractor, I would think, yeah.
All right, I gave it to Menti. I
Okay.
said, check this out,
Yeah, and if you wanna have him call me, but I would definitely put that on the contractor. I mean, they, yes, it was because of the weather, but maybe it should have been sealed up, or at least put a thermal blanket over it.
Mhm.
I just think it was one of those things they never even thought about.
Yeah, there's no flow going right now, so they're
Yeah.
just sitting there,
Yeah.
so. I had a well pit freeze up like that
Yeah, no, I believe that.
past 2 weeks.
It was just the movement of the air. Other than that, that's all I have. Oh, yes, the big one. I had a motor vehicle accident with the truck coming into work. It was me versus a deer, and the deer lost, but I kinda lost too.
This is your new truck?
Yes. Police, right on,
Wait, are you in a competition with Dibble to see who can wreck your
Well-
brand new truck the first?
you know what, Matt, I think I won this one. I'm not sure, but I think I won.
Did you keep the deer?
Huh? No, it's, a matter of fact, it's still sitting on the
You could
side.
have them, I think it's still
Yeah,
sitting out
Yeah, I
there.
passed it
Nice
this
and
morning.
tender.
But, it set off the airbags and that sort of thing, so that's what, it's gonna be, I mean, it's insurance, but it's just the point.
Okay.
6:30 in the morning, coming out 34, jumped out in front of me, nowhere to go,
Yep.
you know, but, so I just wanna make it work.
So are you having venison?
No.
Well, no,
That's
better
what
to hit the
Dibbleville had
deer,
before.
better to hit the deer than swerve off and hit a tree, because they don't
Exactly.
move as much.
Or a car coming the other way.
Yeah, right.
Just have one more thing after Kelly gets
Yeah,
done.
I'm all set.
So I just want to, I think, I guess part of the email Friday, we kind of sent in the proposal for the next phase for the wells. It was task 6. So, Greg, when would you need to be authorized, the latest, I guess, to keep going on that? I mean, we're looking.
And we're gonna finish up task 5 and then essentially have DEP review that. Sooner rather, better than later, because I need to kind of line up some subcontractors. So that's a definite time thing, but, next couple months really is what it comes down to.
So in other words, two months from now, you have to make a decision.
So, yeah.
Seems
Well,
reasonable.
On that topic,
Our,
your rates went way up from last year to this year, right, Pierce?
Because he's doing additional tasks.
Can you make sure that you explain why it went from 45,000 to 65,000?
Oh, yeah, there's actually a list in there of everything that.
I'm slow.
Oh, okay. Now there's, I think there's 7 or 8 itemized tasks there that kind of
Yes,
show
there are, and it's
what we're dealing with.
a 40+% increase.
Yep, yeah, model,
So you need to
modeling
explain-
prices weren't
You need to
included.
explain what happened in the last 7 months
Yep,
that increased it by
the
40%.
modeling prices were not included in that.
Just make sure you put it in writing so they see it.
Okay, sure.
all right, well, our next meeting is 1 month, March 5th. So, we have all the.
But as soon as you get the information, and that's, we can proceed on.
Yep, we should hopefully have the cost for the biological survey, for the NEDB fisheries requirements.
So we're looking to submit that the next meeting, March 5th.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That'd be good, okay.
That'd be good. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn. Those in favor? Aye. This is 2 weeks is President's Day. So we scheduled this one short of another. I mean, if we had something come up, we could schedule a special. When we did the calendar, we didn't see a need for it, right?